Magnus Carlsen is considered by many to be the greatest chess player of all time, and in this video, I'm making the claim that I have found the greatest chess game he has ever played. The setting, it's January 2015, we are at the WhiteElo chess tournament in the Netherlands, it's round 5, and Magnus has the white pieces against the Armenian lion Levon Aronian. I chose this game because it shows Magnus at the peak form of his career at a time when there are 7 players almost rated 2800, and he glides through them like butter, outclassing them from start to finish on all the sides of the board. We're about to get into this game, and right before we do, stick around till the end, because I'm going to share an insane fact about this game when it's over. Alright, here we go. d4 from Magnus, knight f6 from Levon. Actually, kind of standard. We saw this when Nc3 beat Magnus Carlsen in the other game from the best game series. Knight c3 and bishop b4, a Rogozin defense. Very popular for many years now at the top level of chess. So Magnus takes on d5, clarifying the situation in the center, plays bishop to g5, pins the knight to the queen. Levon plays h6, targeting the bishop, and here white can either back up or take. Magnus decides to make this trade, and now play the move queen to a4 check. What this does is it attacks the bishop and the king. Black has to play knight c6, and that move kind of hinders black's queenside movement. Like, as long as white is now going to be able to develop quickly, this knight is going to have to move at some point. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of difficult to guard this, and this knight will become a target in the future when these pawns slowly make their way up the board. But for now, Magnus just plays e3, black castles, and bishop e2. It's better to put the bishop here than here, because here it guards the knight, and if black ever played bishop to g4, he would have been attacking the knight with 2 different pieces, so the bishop is on e2 now, rather than being on d3. You still obviously cannot take this, you're looking to castle. Levon plays bishop e6, short castle, a6. This move is intending this move, and stopping the knight from coming to b5, so we get rook c1. Now, why does Magnus play rook fc1? Well, this kind of shows his class. Both of these moves are possible, rook a and rook f, but the point is that he understands that there's really no danger of the rook leaving the king, and so what he'll do is he will bring his queen back and then use the queen side to expand. And it's better for him to have 2 rooks rather than 1. If this rook stayed on f1, then it wouldn't take part in the queenside advancement. So Magnus is showing his first kind of poke. I'm going to expand on the queenside. So knight e7, obviously black wants to restructure with c6 and bring this knight over here. Magnus plays the move a3. This is a very, I call them Magnesian wrinkles. Normally white just goes knight a4 to try to go knight c5 and create play on that side of the board. Magnus plays a3. Now, here the theory move has always been g7, g5. So black basically says, all right, man, you put your rooks over there, so I'm going to start attacking your king and make you have to worry about this side of the board. Levon chooses not to do that in this game, opting for just putting a rook in the center, and the game goes on. Magnus plays b4. Why is he doing this? Well, you'll notice that Magnus traded off his dark squared bishop. Look at how many pawns are on the dark squares. I talk about this a lot in a lot of my videos. You need to replace the dark squared complex with pawns, right? If you've traded off your dark squared bishop, negating the power of the bishop on d6. Levon plays knight c8. That move potentially eyes this square, actually, because he wants to play knight here and knight to c4. And so now Magnus does go indeed for the move knight a4, focusing on the c5 square. Oh, sorry, I drew the wrong arrow there. Focusing on the c5 square. So this is how good Magnus is. First wave, he's pressuring on the queen side. b6. Understandable move, covering this square. For a guy like Magnus, the move b6 does a few things. Yes, black gets control of this, but at what cost? Black has weakened the a6 pawn. It is no longer protected by a pawn. Black has also weakened the c6 square. Not a single piece in the black position now covers that square. All right, Magnus's work on the queen side is done. He doesn't continue to focus with moves like b5, knight back to b2. What is this? Magnus is routing toward the center. So step 1 has been to weaken the queen side, and now he transfers over. Levon says, all right, I'm down for that. I'm not gonna get this plan. All right, I'm gonna come here and fight for the e5 square. Knight d3, knight g6. Now Magnus says, well, now that I've gotten your knight away from that side of the board, whoever said I was done with the c5 square? a4. The knight defends the pawn on b4, and now this pawn can come forward. When the knight was here, it wasn't protecting this. That would have just been a free pawn. Yes, you can take on c7, because the bishop guards, but Magnus is doing this the right way. He's prodding for this move a5. So for example, had Black played, in the game, Black played a5 himself and stopped it. But if Black plays, you know, for example, bishop f5, Magnus goes a5, and nothing is good here for Black. Like, it's still in the balance, but it's really difficult here for Levon to make a decision. Because if he takes, Magnus first of all can take with the rook and pressure both these pawns. He can also take with the pawn. This is a weakness. He's now got a second file, and that pawn is still in the line of sight of the bishop. If you just move this knight, this rook will forever be glued to defending that pawn. That rook is never going to get into the game. But if Levon pushes b5, he's completely given this square away. I'll just plant my knight there, and I'm going to continue to expand on that side of the board. So for that reason, Levon played a5 himself. Now Magnus plays b5. Locking out the queen side, the square has been grasped, and he will never let go of it. Now the next stage of the game begins. Rook e8, rook c3. He doubles the rooks on the c-file, both guys in the game. Next piece comes. So how does Magnus begin to make progress here? He's looking around the board. He's going, which piece is the most integral to the Black position? Which piece is my biggest adversary right now that I would like to trade? Knight d2. What on earth does that answer? That moves another piece away. Where's this knight even going? It can't even go anywhere. You're about to find out. Levon plays rook d7, potentially looking to double stack, double the rooks on this file. Also, it's just not easy for Black to make a move here because he can't move a lot of pieces. You know, he could have played queen h4, but again, you're not going to mate Magnus. He'll just play g3. And yes, he's moving a pawn in front of his king, but look at, again, the dark squared complex of pawns. Like, this is nothing. This knight can't come forward. The queen can hang out here, but we'll kick the queen out. That's not scary, right? So, rook d7 from Levon, and now g3. This move just blocks out the bishop temporarily. And now on knight f8, we see the whole point of the move knight d2. Magnus plays bishop g4. And by the way, if Magnus had tried to play bishop g4 in this position, then maybe there are some tactics with the move queen h4. I don't think they quite work. But Magnus just cuts everything out of h4. You know, for example, if queen h4, I think you can just call the bluff. I don't actually think you're getting mated here. King comes, and you're safe. The knight can't check you because it's covered. So it looks like you're okay, and if the queen comes back, you just have g4 here, and it hits and it protects as well. So, but he plays g3 to be extra solid, and now the second Levon goes back, bishop g4. That's the point of knight d2. He moved the knight out of the way of the bishop. Why is this trade so important? Why is this trade so important? Because now the center is further destabilized. The only pawn on d5, sorry, I should say the only light squared pawn is on d5 for Black, right? All on this side of the board, on that side of the board. And by destabilizing the light squares, Magnus now leaves himself with two knights, which can fight on the light squares. The dark squared bishop can now fight on the light squares. So he's got a bit of an imbalance there. And then he even goes for a queen trade. Why? Because if you trade queens, this pawn has no guard anymore. It's going to be a lot harder to protect. So queen g5. Notice how we've done damage on the queen side. We've tried to fake toward the center. Now we're doing some work on the king side. h4. That was the other idea of g3. That was the other idea of g3. Long term to hit the queen away from the center of the board. Queen e7. Now, don't just go grabbing. If you grab, I come out with the bishop. I hit your queen, and I hit your rook, and you lose material. You might still be okay, but no need to do this. Magnus stays patient and plays the move rook c6. What does this do? It maintains a lock and a bind on that side of the board. The rook pressures in all the directions, here, here, and once the bishop moves, it's just like turning the screw deeper on pressure in the position. Levon brings the knight back to f6, and now it's time to play knight f4 with some pressure here. If the bishop were to take, then we get queen f4, and we see the other weakness taking effect. If rook c8, that doesn't actually stop anything because of this. The point of rook c6, the pressure on this pawn takes, and like this, every move he plays ties together. So Levon plays g6, trying to maybe play h5, and Magnus just doesn't even let him get there. He plays h5 himself. Now if black takes, he's opening a position. If he plays g5, now you can grab, because after take, queen takes. If the move bishop a3 were to happen, queen f5. You say, Levy, what's the big deal? I just take. Rook takes h6. And you can't stop mate. If you play f6, I play check, and I'm in there. This. Every move the man plays ties together. The move h5 enables taking. As distant as it all seems, this move allows you to take this pawn in the future. Think about that. 3 pieces have to move for this plan to work. And yet it works. It all works. King g7, a trade to destabilize further, and now it's time to take. He does get this move with the discovered attack, but Magnus just backs up. How do you protect? You've got to bring it back, but now the knight comes. The knight that hasn't been playing. The knight comes again, hits the rook, which Levon moved there ages ago, and the pawn. And after bishop takes, you don't take back. It's not checkers. Queen takes g6. King h8. Queen takes another pawn. Just not even taking this bishop yet, giving checks. And in this position, after king g8, de5, Magnus is only up 1 pawn. But what's devastating here is the weakness of the king. And watch as he puts this away. Rook g6 check, king f7. And now the only winning move. You would think, looking at this, it's queen h7. Just hunt the king down, brute force it. No. Rook c4. Get another piece into the game. There are 2 checks here for black, which look very scary. If rook d1, king g2. If queen d5, it looks like a fork. But you just sacrifice the rook. I mean, it's a sacrifice, because then you have check here, and then you hunt the king down like this. It's gonna take a little while after the black queen sacrifices. You can't go here because it's checkmate in 1 move. But Magnus sees all of that. Rook c4, give the rook. It's fine, because I have this rook f6 idea. And in the game, we did get a check. I mean, it's called a spite check. You know you're losing, you just give a check. King g2, rook to h8, and now the process. Rook f4 check, king e8, rook e6. Rook has to block. If the king continues to run, you don't make it very far. I play the stylish move. I can play rook f8 as well, but I sack my queen and you're just boxed in. It's checkmate. So you can't escape. You have to block. He trades, which doesn't even make sense when you first think about it. Like, why would you trade such an active piece? Because it doesn't matter. The king is so weak. Rook e4 check. And here Levon resigned. He resigned because if he moves his king to f7, there is an amazing little sequence. Queen e6 check, king g7, rook g4, to force the king to f8, to then give a check on the f-file, to force the king back, to go here. And it's ladder mate. You basically just ladder the king. Little boomerang technique. Up, force the king to the right, boom, rook f7, queen e8. And look at this. If in the game, king had gone to the d-file, again looking like you're escaping, we can go this way. This is the most it's the first thing that pops out at you. And again, let's not forget, we can't actually take the rook because it's protected. There's only 1 move here that wins, and it's beautiful. It's rook d4. It is showing the fact that you can't take the rook, and the queen is now disconnected from the defense of the rook in the corner. The way Magnus is able to control the queen side, center, and king side is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And for that reason, Levon resigned when Rookie 4 happened. Just a brilliant game. Played on the on one side, down the middle, the king side, ultimately combining all of these things into just a very convincing victory. Now, I said at the end of this game I would share something with you, right? This game was 47 moves, okay? 47 moves. Levon Aronian crossed the halfway point 3 times. In reality, he crossed the halfway point 0 times. What does that mean? Let's go through this game just a little bit fast. The halfway point for black is here. So how many times did Levon play a move on Magnus's side of the board? He played this, but this is the opening. This doesn't really count. And we go a little bit further. It takes a very long time, by the way, for another move to be played that is considered to be on Magnus's side of the board. It takes a very, very long time. It doesn't happen. It still hasn't happened. Magnus, meanwhile, does have something here and is making progress and is doing his thing. It took from move 4 all the way until move 34. 34. It took 30 moves for Levon to cross the middle. And this is already losing. It's already lost. And then, you know what the third move was? It was this. But this is a few moves before resigning. Levon Aronian did not play one meaningful move on the other side of the board. That's what Magnus did to his opponents when he was at the peak of his abilities. Not one. 47 moves played in this game, and not a single one of them, technically, served a purpose or put Magnus in danger on his side of the board. Before we finish, I just want to show you the top player rankings during this era. This is January 2015 when this game is played. Magnus Carlsen at the top, Caruana, Grisha. Look at the amount of players close to 2,800. Anish, at this point, had gained 15 points from the month before and was 2784, climbing to the 2,800 ranks. A year later, he was ranked number 3 in the world. This was a brutal, brutal period of competitive chess, and Magnus Carlsen was on top. On top. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the case that I make, that this is the greatest game that he's ever played. If you have some alternatives, let me know them in the comments below. And yeah, let me know some other players that you'd like me to feature in this series. I'll see you in the next video.